always haunted by the idea that you're wasting your life.
In mid-February 2013, the Cecil Hotel of Los Angeles received complaints of a peculiar dark tinge to the hotel's drinking water. People described how it had a funny taste and a strange odor. One guest even detailed how the shower was awful. When you turned the tap on, the water was coming black first for 2 seconds. A maintenance worker was sent to investigate the tanks on the roof of the building. When he lifted the steel lid of one of the rear tanks, he received the shock of a lifetime. For inside the tank was the bloated, naked body of Elisa Lam. The cause of death was ruled an accident by the police, the bizarre circumstances of it attributed to Elisa's struggle with bipolar disorder. However, in the following months and years, many have been left unsatisfied with this conclusion. Amateur investigators from across the globe have suggested an array of theories which dispute the judgment of the Los Angeles Police Department. As a result, the mysterious death of Elisa Lam has turned into something of an internet meme, with some sensationally judging it the most mysterious case of the 21st century. Yet, beneath all of this was a very real young woman, a woman with varied interests and complicated emotions, a woman who was undoubtedly human. In many ways, it is a poor reflection on society that only through her death could she become such a figure of celebrity. As such, throughout the exploration of this case, I will endeavour to treat Elisa Lam's memory with the respect that it deserves. This was a human tragedy, and we must never lose sight of that fact. In order to begin, we must forget everything that we know about Elisa Lam and go back to the beginning. On the 30th of April 1991, Yina Lam gave birth to a baby girl. She and her husband David named the child Elisa. Throughout her school years, Elisa was known as being level-headed and caring. She was known to regularly support the local community through volunteering. A high school friend, Alex Ristia, would later state,
Elisa was one of the nicest people I knew, just in terms of always caring for other people.
By the time she was 21, Elisa was enrolled at the University of British Columbia. She had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder and was on medication. In spite of this, Elisa did not let this mental illness define who she was. In particular, her social media accounts, which are still available online, helped to illuminate on her mental state in the years and months leading up to her death. From what can be discerned from her blog, Elisa treated depression in a matter-of-fact manner, with the occasional firm dose of gallows humor.
My behavior is pathetic. Reading about Dal Kim, listening to My Chemical Romance. It is as though I'm imitating myself from 2007. Next I'll be wearing studs and guitar earrings.
That being said, Elisa would write self-depreciating posts. In many ways, she lent on her blog as an emotional crutch, a genuinely emotive online journal for her to expel, dissect, and analyze her mental illness. She posted frequently and in depth. She once told of the time she relapsed into depression, crumbling under the pressures of various academic responsibilities. Sometimes her posts had a darker edge, which help us to better understand her continuing struggle with depression.
Depression sucks. I have no control over my emotions. I'll be angry for 2 minutes, and then sad again. I'll be happy for a half an hour, and then emotional again.
Regardless of these moments, Elisa still fostered deep interests and passions. She loved art and fashion, and displayed a keen interest in the world around her. Her social media posts were also filled with an appreciation of poetry, grammar, writing, and wordplay, showing her to be not only a passionate, but also intellectually astute young woman. Her blog ended in July 2012, after which she moved to Tumblr. Yet, as time went by, the darker moments of depression receded, from her social media platforms at the very least. By January 2013, only 1 month before her disappearance, her posts were far more optimistic, with a strong yearning to overcome her depression.
It will never rain roses. When we want to have more roses, we must plant more roses.
Across her social media platforms, Elisa appeared to have adopted a quotation, "You're always haunted by the idea you're wasting your life," as her personal mantra. Indeed, it seemed as though every one of her actions was characterized by an attempt to disprove that idea in her mind. On the 7th of January 2013, Elisa announced that she had booked a flight to begin a whirlwind adventure that she excitedly referred to as her West Coast tour. Before she left, she had what she described as a bon voyage soirée with old friends from elementary and high school. The event had been exhausting, but full of joy and special moments, as well as a clear sense of hope for the future.
But I am so very full of, I suppose the term would be, as Dumbledore says, love. Because last night was evidence that I do have amazing, beautiful things in my life. I'm not a professional depressed person. I'm so much more than that, and these people are my reminders that I'm very lucky. Life is long and difficult, and people will always be stupid and complain, but it's worth it so long as you have special moments. There will be lots of these moments in the future, and there have been a lot in the past. Thank you, friends, family, and Tumblr. The world is just awesome.
The following day, the 22nd of January, Elisa flew out to San Diego. During her travels before her death, she said that she was happy. Even after getting lost at the airport and missing her connecting flight, Elisa greeted the situation with cheerful optimism, stating that it could be worse, as United Airlines provides blankets, and she had Wi-Fi. She even joked that the unexpected mishap provided her with the opportunity to recreate Tom Hanks's character's airport living in the movie The Terminal. Throughout her following days in California, Elisa was known to have spoken with her parents every day. She told them that she was happy, and by all accounts, she was.
Today I slept, took a long hot shower, stuffed myself silly with a $3 dinner, and it has been the most productive and enjoyable. I seriously have done nothing in San Diego that is out of my normal routine at home. I do what I want. After all, I like my home comforts, and every now and again, I do something entirely impulsive and reckless. Like tell a guy I just met, I like him.
On the 29th, Elisa arrived in Los Angeles and checked into the Cecil Hotel for 3 nights. Situated near the notorious Skid Row area of downtown Los Angeles, the hotel did not have the cleanest of reputations. The Cecil Hotel, also known as Stay on Main, had received mixed reviews from its guests across the years. One female customer even recalled how, in 2011, she was spied on through a bathroom vent whilst taking a shower at the hotel. Skid Row itself is known for having one of the largest stable homeless populations in the United States, with approximately 3,000 to 6,000 people living on the streets. Elisa's last post on Tumblr captured the rundown nature of the area. By this point, she was using a cell phone which she had borrowed from a friend after losing hers a few days earlier on the 27th.
There is a monstrosity of a building next to the place I'm staying. When I say monstrosity, mind you, I'm saying as in gaudy. But then again, it was built in 1928, hence the Art Deco theme. So yes, it is classy, but then since it's LA, it went on crack.
Not long after that, no one would hear from her again. On the 31st of January, a hotel worker at the Cecil was the last known person to have seen her alive. The following morning, the 1st of February, Elisa did not check out of the hotel, prompting the Cecil to file a report with the police. On the 6th of February, the LA Police Department released the details of the suspicious disappearance of a young Vancouver woman. The next day, the police department held a press conference on the disappearance of Elisa Lam. By the 13th, concern for Elisa had mounted. The police released security footage from the hotel elevator, recorded shortly after midnight on the 1st of February. This was the last known location of Elisa. The footage shows her acting oddly, to say the least. A few days later, on the 19th of February, the LAPD received a phone call from the Cecil Hotel, reporting the discovery of a body. After several guests had complained about the water quality, the hotel had sent a worker up to inspect the water tanks. The body of a young woman was found in one of them. Detective Tennell, one of the primary detectives on the case, arrived at the scene that afternoon and confirmed that the body was indeed Elisa Lam.
It was the rooftop of the Cecil Hotel, a 15-story hotel built in the 1920s. The rooftop has 4 1,000-gallon water tanks, reportedly used to supply the hotel with water. The decedent was found floating face up in the tank to the northeast. It appeared to be approximately half to 3/4 full when looked into the tank. There was an unsecured removable metal hatch on top of the tank. Clothing and shoes were also found in the tank. A hotel keycard and watch were found amongst the clothing.
On the 21st of February, an autopsy was carried out by Drs. Yulai Wang and Jason Tovar. Unusually, the autopsy report was not released to the public until several months later, in late June. On the 15th, the doctors checkmarked Elisa's death as accidental. However, 3 days later, on the 18th, their conclusion was hastily changed to could not be determined. Yet, before release to the public, this was once more changed back to the original conclusion. Elisa Lam's death was accidental. The autopsy report stated that Elisa was on 4 different psychiatric medications for her bipolar disorder at the time of her death. There were no signs of foul play. However, the results of a rape kit, if one was done, are not known, and there was blood pooling found in her rectum. Traces of alcohol were also found in her liver bile. By this point, Elisa's mysterious death had piqued the interest of the media. It was a true American horror story, one which, bizarrely, seemed to parody the events of the 2005 film Dark Water. In the movie, the body of a young woman is discovered inside a water tank after a series of floods in the building. Bizarrely, it was reported that, on the night of Elisa Lam's disappearance, a long-time resident of the hotel heard a tremendous noise come from the 4th floor. Water also flooded across the floor that night, much like in the film. Although there may not be a link between the two, the similarities between Elisa Lam's death and Darkwater illustrate the mystery and confusion which surrounds this case. So, the official explanation for Elisa's death was accidental. Using the evidence provided by the autopsy, amateur sleuths have attempted to reconstruct the events which may have led to this tragedy. Elisa's bipolar disorder would have exposed her to a succession of manic and depressive moods. Certainly, the toxicology report stated that she was on several different types of psychiatric medication. The American Psychiatric Association recommends an antidepressant in conjunction with a mood stabilizer and antipsychotic drugs in order to manage the symptoms of bipolar disorder. From what the autopsy reports, Elisa was indeed on the correct medication. However, when the doctors tested her blood, they found that whilst Elisa had taken some of the medication, including her antidepressant, around the day that she died, she had not taken her antipsychotic medication for a while. Without antipsychotics to balance the effects of antidepressants, studies have shown an increased risk of manic episodes in bipolar patients. Severe mania is known to induce hallucinations, delusions, paranoia, and lack of insight. It has been theorized that Elisa Lam was undergoing such a manic episode in the elevator. This can be said to have been especially evidenced by the strange way in which she moved her hands. This could be a sign of psychomotor agitation, namely a series of unintentional and purposeless motions that stem from mental tension and anxiety. Such mental tension could have arisen from a manic episode. While some have argued that the toxicology report was not accurate, due to Elisa's body being in the water tank for so long, this is not the case. The blood samples which the coroners analysed were taken from Elisa's internal organs. These would not have been affected by the bloating of her body in the same way that ordinary samples derived from veins would have been. Other than her psychiatric medication, there were no traces of any other drugs and only minimal amounts of alcohol in her system. As such, there was nothing else such as recreational drugs which could have induced mania. Thus, in the grip of some excited delusion or hallucination, Elisa ran to the roof, took off all her clothes, jumped into the water tank and drowned. This is the hypothesis that best encapsulates the accidental death scenario. It is a neat and simple explanation. Crazy people do crazy things. Yet, it is incomplete. First of all, there is no evidence to suggest that Elisa's manic episodes would have culminated in life-endangering insanity. There is no such precedent in her life. In fact, using her previous episodes of her mental illness to illustrate a probable relapse, we can hypothesize that Elisa would have been more inclined towards deep depression, and not a life-endangering situation.
I feel I'm wasting my time compared to my fellow peers. I had a relapse at the start of the term and had to drop 2 of the 3 courses I was taking. Now I'm down to 1 course, and I've missed 3 weeks of class since my sleeping pattern is completely reversed. I'm a bit defeated, for I have far too much free time and no one to spend it with. I'm checking emails, blog loving, Facebook and Tumblr all the time. I even jumped on the Twitter foray. I have a short attention span, and I'm avoiding writing these 3 papers I owe on this course. I can text friends who are busy with either school or work, but I have neither of these things going for me.
It must be remembered that mental illness is always personalized. No 2 cases are ever exactly alike. From what can be discerned from her social media posts, which often go into great detail, Elisa's previous experiences with bipolar relapses indicate that she mainly experienced fluctuations between negative and positive emotion. That is to say, to have such an extreme episode of mania, where she would lift a heavy steel lid of a water tank in order to drown herself, is extremely out of character. It seems too calculated for a person experiencing a manic episode. If manic-driven suicide had been Elisa's intention, jumping from the roof of the building would have been far easier. There is also another inconsistency with the accidental explanation. According to the autopsy report, Elisa's clothes were covered in a, quote, sand-like particulate. Most likely from the pebbles on the roof of the building, this evidence suggests that Elisa's clothes would have been on the ground before thrown into the water tank. This means that, in order to support the accidental theory, she would have had to have got naked, thrown her clothes on the floor, picked them back up, only to then throw them into the tank along with herself. Once again, jumping from the roof of the building would have made more sense. Then there is the question of the hinged lid of the tank. As the tank was estimated to have been 1/2 to 3/4 full when her body was found, Elisa would not have been able to reach the lid in order to close it once she was inside. The only way for the lid to have been closed after her in this scenario would have been for her to have somehow shuffled under a half-open lid with all her clothes in such a way that gravity would have shut her in. All of this being said, the accidental explanation cannot be refuted completely, for madness inherently means something outside of normal expectations, something which does not operate according to any set of rules. Thus, it will always be easy to dismiss Elisa Lam's death as a result of some sort of inexplicable crazed episode. Many who have researched the Elisa Lam case are left with the feeling that there is an unnatural force involved. Indeed, some have even put forward paranormal explanations for her death. One theory that has been put forward involves something called the elevator game. A paranormal ritual which originates from Korea, the elevator game is said to allow the participant access to another world. It is a game which must be played alone, in a building that is at least 10 stories high and has an elevator. By visiting several of the floors in a specific order, one will eventually encounter a young woman, who will enter the elevator on the 5th floor. Players are instructed not to engage the woman. After this, it is said that one will reach an other world. This other world looks much like ours, but is reported to be dark and empty, except for a red cross in the distance. Should players ever interact with the young woman who enters the elevator, they may never see anything again. Some claim that Elisa Lam was playing that game in the elevator. Certainly, the elevator footage released by the police shows her pressing many of the elevator's buttons, seemingly with some intent in mind. Was she trying to return from the other world? Then there is the scene of her hiding in the corner, almost as if trying to conceal herself from someone's view. Could the demonic young woman of the elevator game have claimed Elisa Lam's life? There is, in fact, a similar case to Elisa Lam which occurred in Kuala Lumpur in 2015. A 43-year-old man was found dead in a water tank on the roof of a condominium building, with no visible injuries or trauma. Drowning was ruled out as the cause of death, as there was no water retention in the man's lungs. Not only that, the water tank was securely locked, with the only keys held by security officers. Similar again is a case from Singapore. In 2011, the body of a 30-year-old maid was found in a water tank. Could these mysterious deaths all be linked to the supposedly deadly elevator game? It is highly circumstantial evidence at best. As is often the case, unexplained events often lead to the addition of bizarre claims. The notion of Elisa Lam playing the elevator game has severe drawbacks. Some investigators who have studied the footage and the hotel claim that Elisa was on the 14th floor. Should this other world have even been able to have been seen on a security camera, it should have been on the 10th floor. In fact, none of the steps in the elevator game involved the 14th floor whatsoever. There is, however, one paranormal connection on the 14th floor of the Cecil Hotel. From 1984 to 85, Richard Ramirez, the notorious serial killer also known as the Night Stalker, lived on the 14th floor of the hotel. During his year of terror, Ramirez was known to have killed and raped more than a dozen people, using the Cecil Hotel as a base. He was an avowed Satanist and was also suspected of conducting nefarious rituals on the roof of the building. Some people claim to see a shadowy spectre come into the elevator during the footage, suggesting that the Night Stalker was continuing his bloody work in the afterlife. This theory is a favourite amongst the sensationally driven, with many, including BuzzFeed, having publicised this claim. However, there is a problem with this theory. Elisa Lam could not have been killed by Ramirez's ghost, as Ramirez was still alive at the time of her death. Elisa Lam disappeared on the 1st of February 2013. Ramirez died later that year, on the 7th of June. Moving on from the impossible Ramirez ghost theory, there is evidence to suggest that many hotels in the area have a dark past. After all are remnants of a glamorous age that turned suddenly dark after the Great Depression. What were once elegant hotels showcasing innovative styles of architecture quickly decayed, becoming the dilapidated homes of the downtrodden. The nearby Skid Row became the area with the largest stable population of homeless in the US. In 2007, it was reported that amongst the homeless population of Los Angeles, there is 1 death per day. Suicides are not uncommon in the region either, with 6 jumper suicides being reported in the area in less than 4 months in 2009. Indeed, according to official statistics, 1 person commits suicide every 2 hours in the state of California. And one can presume that the Skid Row adds more than its fair share to that statistic. Thus, whatever structure one points to in this area of Los Angeles, most likely has murder, suicide, and every other kind of crime connected to it. The Cecil Hotel was nothing out of the ordinary. However, since Elisa Lam's death, the Cecil's dark history has been blown out of proportion. Rather than be regarded as a product of its location and history, the hotel has attracted a reputation of magnified suspicion. It has been stated that since its construction in 1924, there have been at least 15 deaths caused by non-natural events. The hotel has been a hotspot for suicide victims and tragedy since the 1930s. On one occasion in 1944, a woman unaware that she was pregnant gave birth in one of the hotel's bathrooms, only to then throw the newborn out of the window, believing it to be deceased. In fact, Richard Ramirez was not the only serial killer hosted by the Cecil Hotel. Jack Unterweger stayed there in 1991 during his international killing spree. He would lure call girls through the fire exit of the hotel, only to murder them by strangling them with their bras. It has been suggested that these 2 killers were influenced by a dark entity which resides at the hotel, an entity which could have driven Elisa to take her own life. Thus, in the years after Elisa's death, the Cecil's infamy has increased, being known as a location for the more seedy types in society. Some even claim that it is a hotspot for occultists. Indeed, some believe that Elisa's death may have been staged by a sinister elite cult wishing to demonstrate new technologies and practice biological terrorism. The narrative goes that this alleged cult lured Elisa to the hotel, perhaps via a young soldier seducing her online. After all, Elisa was known to have made new friends via the internet, and even expressed on her Tumblr how she had met a new romantic interest in San Diego only a few days before her death. It is theorized that this soldier was parading the group's new stealth technology, an invisibility device of sorts, in the famous elevator footage. It is proposed that Elisa became part of a sinister plan to advertise the capabilities of this new technology. She was killed by the group, with her body being used to spread a new resistant form of tuberculosis through the hotel's water supply. A fantastical assumption for sure, but there is some circumstantial evidence to support this theory. During the time of Elisa's death, a company called the Invisible Light Agency was based out of the Cecil Hotel. This company was supervised by 3 men, including Anthony Vu. It is recorded on Vu's LinkedIn profile that during this time he was also working for a government subsidy, Raytheon Missile Systems, as a senior visual effects artist. Thereby beckoning the question, why would a government employee working for an arms manufacturer be working almost secretly at the Cecil Hotel? Then there is the elevator footage. At times, Elisa seems confused, almost as though she was interacting with something that was not visible. Bizarrely, only a few days prior, on the 12th of January, she tweeted about a Canadian company which was creating new stealth camouflage suits. Could it be that she had been in contact with someone who worked for Raytheon and sought to meet up with him during her West Coast tour? This idea could help to explain Elisa's motivation for wanting to go to Los Angeles alone, to have an exciting young love affair. It could be that the footage in the elevator captures the moment her new love interest was showing off the technology that they had been chatting online about a few weeks before. There is one final piece of this alleged evil plot. A few days after Elisa Lam's death, a resistant strain of tuberculosis spread amongst the homeless population near the Cecil Hotel. Was this location chosen to spread a new biological weapon because of its known high density of homeless people? What makes this all the more eerie is the name of the test employed to diagnose TB. Lam Elisa. It is suggested that this sinister elite cult had a policy of leaving a signature on their actions, by purposefully creating odd coincidences in names and signs which implicate them. Usually these signs and symbols have something to do with Lucifer, thus the Invisible Light Agency perhaps being an allegoric reference to a Luciferian invisible weapon. Lucifer, after all, means light bringer. As the Lam Elisa TB test was created before Elisa Lam's death, this could be a reason why she was chosen by the cult. Not to mention the fact that, as she suffered from depression, scapegoating her murder on suicide would have been easy. However, this malevolent conspiracy has no tangible proof. In fact, there is more evidence against it. Whilst the Invisible Light Agency did exist, it was not a secretive project. Rather, it was a visual effects company set up by 3 men for the purpose of designing a concept of an immersive cocoon, which is a futuristic conception for a workspace. In California, it is not uncommon for a visual effects company to be set up for a single project in a dingy location. Testimonies from other visual effect artists state that this is occasionally done to lessen the running costs of an operation and maximize profits. It is also not uncommon for a visual effects artist to then be employed by the government after experiencing a few of these intense small-scale projects. This would have most likely been the case of Anthony Vu and his colleagues. For many, this is the ideal outcome, as a government job is by far less intense. As for Elisa Lam's tweet connecting her to the Canadian company's invisibility device, it is most likely an innocent explanation. As she was a fan of Harry Potter, evidenced by her social media accounts, it is probable that this article, covered by a major newspaper, simply reminded her of the famous invisibility cloak in the novels. The connection between Elisa's name and that of the TB test Lam Elisa, although disconcerting, is most likely coincidental. A bizarre red herring. There is, however, one detail of this conspiracy which is worthy of further examination. Elisa's body language when in the elevator has been examined by experts, who claim that it does suggest that she was interacting with someone else. In particular, that her actions demonstrate her being playful and even sensual. Thus, was someone there with her outside of camera shot. Some have also raised the possibility that Elisa was double-jointed after analysing photographs and her social media accounts. If this was the case, her seemingly bizarre hand and arm movements could be explained as her stretching and cracking her joints to relieve pressure. Indeed, her actions seem a lot more normal when one realises that the elevator footage has been slowed down. Yes, the footage has been changed. In fact, many have noticed that not only was the elevator footage slowed down, but that at least a minute of it is missing. When one looks at the timestamp, it seems to have been deliberately corrupted in order to conceal this. The jump in the timestamp occurs when Elisa is outside of the elevator. There is also a second, smaller series of jumps in the footage immediately afterwards. One amateur investigator has even attempted to restore the footage to its actual speed. When played side by side, the difference is noticeable. The original, released by the LAPD, had 15 frames per second. The correct frame rate is around 20 frames per second. Arguably, the tampered footage is the most perplexing element of the Elisa Lam case. Could there have been someone else with her? Someone she was playing a game with? The following narrative seems to be the theory which best weaves this tragedy together. At the time Elisa visited the Cecil Hotel, there were 3 registered sex offenders living on the premises, as well as other questionable characters as per the area. The hotel had recently been put under new management, which was planning a change of direction for the Cecil. Renovations and a new marketing strategy to transform the hotel into something more upmarket had been proposed. The LA Times had previously written an article detailing how many of the hotel's long-term residents feared this would drive up rates and force them to leave. One such resident who was interviewed by the newspaper was Alvin Taylor, a registered sex offender. At the time of the interview, Taylor had lived at the hotel for 26 years. Could a disgruntled resident or coalition of residents have engendered a sinister plot to undermine the hotel's plans to become more upmarket? Undoubtedly, the suggestion that 21-year-old Elisa Lam was seduced by an older man, Taylor having been 68 at the time of her disappearance, is dubious. But one must remember that Taylor is not the only candidate in this mystery. Indeed, one personal testimony from 2013 reported that a 1-month stay at the Cecil resulted in attempted rape, assault, robbery, as well as false criminal charges after mixing with the wrong sorts at the hotel. If the testimony is to be believed, it suggests that Alvin Taylor and his adopted son, Aiden, being implicated in Elisa's death is not unbelievable.
I was robbed and my life was threatened. The police would not help me, and so I went into hiding. His adopted son Aiden is definitely a manipulative criminal who will do anything for money. I'm speaking out about this because I honestly do believe that he is still trying to find me, and I honestly do believe that her death is involved with him.
Further intrigue can be found in CNN's report on the aftermath of the Elisa Lam tragedy. During their piece, they interviewed Alvin Taylor, who was more than eager to describe how bad the drinking water was. He bemoaned the fact that the water was being flushed out with chlorine, expressing how others were moving on to other hotels.
Really turned to my stomach. Just while a lot of people have left and went to another hotel. Just the thought of it for so long.
It is bizarre that, in spite of the polluted water, which he himself criticized, Taylor decided to remain at the hotel. And he was not the only one. Although guests from 27 rooms were relocated to another hotel after the discovery of Elisa's body, 11 rooms remained filled. Those who willingly chose to remain at the hotel were required to sign a waiver in which they acknowledged being informed of the health risks and were being provided bottled water. Thus, there was a motive to kill Elisa Lam. A young female Canadian tourist is killed in the hotel and is found after having been decomposing into the hotel's drinking water for weeks. Such an incident would most certainly destroy a hotel's reputation, demonstrating it as being dangerous and poorly maintained. All the worse for a hotel which has the intentions of going more upmarket. The outcome would be financial stagnation, thereby keeping the rents down for those who wished to remain there. It could have been Taylor, his son, one of the other sex offenders, or any of the other multitude of people who lived at the hotel and had no scruples. Beside the suspicion cast on the tenants, one must also keep in mind that a hotel, by its very nature, is filled with people passing through. Its population is constantly changing. John Douglas, a former special investigator for the FBI, has estimated that in the US there is anywhere between 25 to 50 serial killers active at any one time. Not only that, there have been some serial killers who have been known to travel so as to elude the authorities and perform their murders anonymously. One of the Cecil's former residents, as mentioned before, Jack Unterweger, was one such type of murderer. As such, if Elisa's life had been claimed by a nomadic killer, it would not be the first time then that a serial killer passing by decided to take a life at the Cecil Hotel. In many respects, it would have been the perfect circumstance. Disposing of Elisa in the water tank would have meant the murderer could have checked out of the hotel and moved on long before her body was discovered. Indeed, during the court proceedings in the aftermath of Elisa's death, Detective Tennell stated that there was a second piece of surveillance, recorded before the infamous elevator footage, which showed Elisa with two mysterious men.
We did see her come in with two gentlemen. They had a box, gave it to her. She went up to the elevator. We never saw them again on video.
No further information relating to these men or the contents of the box has been released to the public. Re-examining the elevator footage, it is noticeable how, when Elisa initially pushes the button to go to another floor, the elevator does not move. After a while, she appears to poke her head around the elevator quickly, almost as though looking to see if someone is there. It seems as though she spies someone, quickly retreating to the corner of the elevator. Was she reacting to someone? Could there have been someone playing with Elisa by pushing the button on the elevator to keep her on that floor? And, more importantly, were they involved in her death? It is a fallacy to presume that it would have been in any way difficult for someone to have reached the roof of the hotel without triggering an alarm system. As this Chinese YouTuber demonstrated in March 2013, one does not even have to be a hotel employee to not only reach the roof, but access the water tanks themselves, two of which had their lids open when he was there. Disturbingly, given recent events, at no point during his filming did he attract the attention of a member of staff. Less than 1 month after the discovery of Elisa's body, this is horrifying to say the least. Anyone could have taken Elisa to the rooftop. In addition to this, the ease with which anyone could have accessed the fire exit is evidenced by what seems to be fresh graffiti. It was left both next to the water tank and nearby in a varied, possibly older form. Whilst showcasing the ease with which one can access the roof, these two pieces of graffiti do offer potential further evidence. Possibly written by different people at different times, the similarity of language is strange, especially when one considers that the undated one left by the water tank appears to be somewhat more legible and fresh. Are they linked? Possibly being left as the mark of criminal activity on the roof of the building. Some claim that the words appearing in the graffiti translate from Piggish Latin into something akin to "I am finished with her." This poses the question, who would graffiti anything in Piggish Latin, especially in such a place? It has been speculated that the use and perversion of Latin is commonly used by some nefarious occultists, and that this graffiti was the mark of their evil actions. There is much, then, to suggest that Elisa Lam was the victim of foul play. However, there is something still missing in this explanation. Why was the elevator footage manipulated? The timestamp on the bottom left seems to have been deliberately corrupted. A whole minute of the footage was just erased, and then the video was slowed down. Only someone with access to the hotel security footage could have altered it. But then, why risk tampering with evidence and possibly be prosecuted? A better question is this: how could the police have not noticed that the footage had been tampered with? It has been suggested that the police wanted to hide an innocent bystander to avoid implicating them in the case. Undoubtedly, this logic is flawed. Anyone appearing on the footage of a disappearance case past midnight surely warrants further investigation. And then, even if one accepts this explanation, why one whole minute? It does not take someone a minute to pass in front of a camera. If there was someone else there, they must have been interacting with Elisa Lam in order to have warranted a full minute of footage. Even more dubious is that the video was deliberately slowed down to seemingly cover up the erasal of that 1 minute. It has been stated that the police were reluctant to release this footage to the public. It is here that we enter the realm of conspiracy. Either the hotel staff was somehow complicit in Elisa's murder, or the police tampered with the video for some obscure reason. The creative limits of conspiracy are boundless at this point. Were the police involved in Elisa's death? It may have been one of their own that was involved, either as a rogue killer or as an occult member performing a sacrifice. Or was it someone else that they were trying to cover up? Someone influential and powerful? Were they protecting a police informer who lived or worked at the hotel and was involved in Elisa's death? So many questions remain unanswered. When Detective Marcia of the LAPD, one of the minor detectives on the case, was asked for a comment, he said, "Good detectives operate under this principle, Occam's razor. Other things being equal, a simpler explanation is better than a more complex one. In other words, when you hear hoofbeats, think horses, not zebras. Once the horses are eliminated, then move on to zebras." Yet, what a zebra they painted in their explanation of Elisa Lam's death. A manic episode in which she climbed to the roof, stripped naked, threw her clothes on the floor and then picked them back up, only to bring them with her in order to make her fatal leap into the water tank, as she struggled with closing the heavy hinged lid behind her. An amazing zebra by any standard. Should not the hoofbeats have been more inclined towards the horse? A young woman, by herself, in a hotspot for murderers and rapists that was killed for some nefarious purpose. As the fictional detective Sherlock Holmes would advise, it is a capital mistake to theorize before one has data. Insensibly, one begins to twist facts to suit theories, instead of theories to suit facts. It seems as though the police were determined to blame Elisa's death on an accident caused by her mental illness. In doing so, they twisted facts to suit their theory. She had bipolar disorder, therefore that must have been the reason why she killed herself, even though there is no evidence to show that her previous relapses culminated in a life-endangering scenario. The coroners were unsure of what to mark on the autopsy report. Other professional coroners have condemned their conclusion as questionable. Indeed, one of the coroners involved had a lawsuit filed against him for mishandling an autopsy on another case. The police were indeed questionable when handling this case. In the wake of the infamous San Bernardino shootings of the 12th of February, it can be said that the police had their hands too full with the fallout to be able to handle Elisa's case properly. Indeed, according to the NPR, 1/3 of all homicides in America go unresolved, which is a remarkable decrease from over 90% being solved 50 years ago. Elisa Lam may very well be part of the forgotten third of murder victims in the United States. From the evidence gathered, it did not appear that Elisa was in any way unstable in Los Angeles. From her social media posts, she clearly had hope for the future. Elisa was a passionate, intelligent, and at times dark young woman, but never was there a sense that she was reckless or suicidal. In fact, while staying at the Cecil Hotel, one of the last people to interact with her was Katie Orphan, the manager of a nearby bookshop. Orphan stated that she remembered Elisa coming to buy books and music for her family back home in Vancouver. Orphan said Elisa had expressed worry about fitting all of the gifts into her luggage. It seemed like she had plans to return home, plans to give things to her family members and reconnect with them. The details of the whereabouts of the books she bought, along with the rest of her luggage, remains obscure, as are the reasons behind why the last known footage of her was corrupted. Not forgetting the intentions and identities of the two men supposedly seen with Elisa in the hotel lobby. The confusion does not end there either. This case is filled with bizarre synchronicities. The 2005 film Dark Water, the tuberculosis test Lam Elisa, used during what was the largest outbreak of TB in Los Angeles in a decade, occurring only a few days after Elisa's death. There is also the matter of one of the last places Elisa was seen, Katie Orphan's Los Angeles bookshop, chillingly called the Last Bookstore. When one looks into the shop's website registration information, one discovers yet another shocking link to Elisa Lam. The domain's registrant address is a PO box in Burnaby, Canada. The provided zip code, however, does not match this location. Rather, it relates to Forest Lawn Funeral Home, the very same place that Elisa's funeral was held. The reasons behind this link are not known. However, it is necessary to point out that according to online records, this domain information was updated in September 2015. Could it be that the address associated with the bookshop's website was altered as part of a malevolent practical joke? After all, the death of Elisa Lam has attracted so much intrigue online that it stands to reason that not everyone's actions will be well intended. Although disturbing, it is most likely that these synchronicities are just bizarre coincidences, the result of a case being scrutinized too much by too many. Unfortunately, the evidence that is available cannot be deemed anything but inconclusive. Though, from what can be discerned, it is probable that the paranormal was not involved in the death of Elisa Lam. Only the terrible and tragically normal. Thank you for watching. After investigating this case, we felt personally moved by this tragedy and so have launched a petition in an attempt to reopen Elisa's case. In our minds, there are clearly questions which still need to be answered. Please, if you have the time, have a look and show your support. A link is in the description. I would also like to extend a big thank you to Heidi for guest narrating Elisa's social media entries. Please check out her channel and show support. Thank you also to our patrons for supporting the making of this video. Until the next time, why not take a look at one of the videos suggested on screen? Remember, the more you know, the more there is to fear.